Hello there, people of the internet. I have something very special right here. This is something I've been wanting for a very, very long time. This is a French Gras rifle, and it's been a dream rifle of mine for a long time. Now, this right here is an unboxing video, but I already did the unboxing, off camera, because there was a bunch of packing peanuts and whatnot inside this, and it spent like 10 minutes trying to open this up, so I figured I'd just cut that out of the video. It came in a long box, which is this right here. Oh boy, I cut that open with a knife. I think it was wrapped up in bubble wrap and a piece of cardboard holding everything all together. So there you go, there's your unboxing. And that probably saved us about 15 minutes of me doing just that. And this right here is what we have out of that box. This right here very much is a French Gras rifle. If we look right here, un momento por favor, the little screw on the side of the receiver needs to be at a certain distance, otherwise this won't open. If we look in right here, we will see how there's this little cutout in the receiver. And that right there was done because if ruptured cases happened inside the chamber, well, the gas from those ruptured cases would come out the sides of the receiver instead of blowing through the bolt back into the shooter's face. So this right here is the updated version, and what I really like about this particular one is that if we look on this side, this right here is something I was not expecting, but I was very much hoping for. We can see how this says 1866/74. It's kind of hard to see because of how worn the receiver is. But what that means is that this right here is actually a chassepot rifle that was converted into a Gras rifle. And that right there gives me the excellent opportunity to make videos on both chassepot rifles and Gras rifles because I've got literally both of them sitting right here. This right here is the cavalry version, and you can tell that from our 3 barrel bands here. And of course it's going to be dirty. This right here did come from Royal Tiger Imports. I got enough dirt on this thing to like start growing plants, but it is functional. I've already taken the bolt apart. We do have ourselves a functioning extractor and a functioning ejector, which is just kind of on the bottom of the bolt. And upon taking the bolt apart, the firing pin on the inside also looks like it will be functional, which is fantastic. If we look over here on the barrel, we see some Ethiopian writing, and I believe that this translates to "in service of the Emperor," or the Emperor Haile Selassie, who was the Emperor at the time, or maybe it has something to do with his wife Tito, or Tito, however that is pronounced. I have not actually translated it myself. This is just what I've, figured out from research. We've got what I'm assuming are serial numbers. I'm assuming that's a serial number. I have no idea what what that right there says. I simply do not speak the early forms of Amharic. I'm assuming that's what that is. This right here, if we look on the side of the receiver, it says M80 right there. That simply means that this right here does have that cutout in the receiver whenever these rifles were updated. To have that cutout, I think that this is I don't know, I'm gonna have to clean this up in order to actually see the manufacturer, because I simply cannot read that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to clean that up before I make any announcements on who manufactured this rifle. On the side of the barrel right here, we got ourselves a serial number. We got ourselves a couple of proof marks. We are missing the slider on our rear sight, but I don't foresee me shooting this thing, at distances that requires a slider. So, all in all, this right here does look like it is in fairly decent shape. Now, all of that being said, I wanted to go ahead and cover all of the good before we start going into the bad. We do have a functional rifle with a functional firing pin, functional ejector. I'm willing to bet that if I put ammunition inside of this thing and pulled the trigger, it probably would fire. So all of that being said, I want to show off this right here. The wood on this rifle is worn down so heavily, and you can really see that with these barrel bands, that they actually had to, I'm assuming that this is Ethiopians back whenever they were using these rifles. I'm assuming that this was done by them, but they had to put leather strips in between the barrel bands in order to keep the barrel bands holding the barrel onto the stock itself. And I can actually move this barrel band backwards onto stock because of how worn out the wood is. Like this wood, if I look over here, you can really see it. This wood has probably been worn down like 2 millimeters on each side. If you look at just how skinny the wood is along the barrel is actually thicker than the wood itself. You can see how the barrel sticks out right there. You can see really on the retaining what would you call these, retaining springs for the barrel bands, just how worn out this wood is along where the barrel bands are. And it's the entire stock that's worn out. So because it's the entire stock and not necessarily one specific place, there's a couple of things that might have happened with this rifle to make the wood so ridiculously worn out. One thing, this right here being a cavalry carbine, it is likely that this was inside of a sheath or, inside of some sort of a case or container whenever it was in use, and so it was constantly shaking around whenever it was being rode around on horseback. And just that, years and years and years and years of shaking around inside of a sheath wore down the wood. That would be my bet on the most likely thing that happened. Besides that, the only other really likely thing that might have happened, maybe this rifle was used in a very sandy environment. So you have consistent sand blowing on the rifle, and so as a result, you basically have essentially the equivalency of sandblasting on the rifle. And although that right there is likely not the scenario, it is possible. I have seen that on rifles before, I've seen that on multiple goods, not just rifles. So it is something that might have happened, but just judging by the wear of the rifle, I don't think that is the case. If we look over by the barrel bands themselves, we can see how the wood actually is less worn towards the bands, as opposed to more like the center pieces of the wood in between the bands. And so because of that right there, you can really see it right here, how this kind of dips down. And so as a result of that right there, I think that it was some sort of fabric or some sort of surface that was consistently rubbing on these. And the bands stopped that fabric from rubbing on the wood as much next to the bands, because, the bands would be holding the fabric off of the wood. And so as a result, we have more wear in the center of the wood as opposed to over by the bands, and that's not something that would happen if it was consistently being hit by sand or something like that. So I'm willing to bet there was probably done as a result of like a sheath or something, or a cover or a case or something that had this rifle smashing around inside of it for who knows how long. Okay, now if we look on the side of uno momento por favor, forgive my horrendous camera work here, somewhere here I don't see it anymore. Ah, yes. Okay, here we go. If we look right here, if this will show up on camera, right there on the side of the sight, we have a manufacture date, I believe, and probably the conversion date. I believe that this right here was converted from a Chassepot rifle to a Gras rifle in 1887. We got ourselves one date there. And then probably in 1884 is whenever they did the M80 update to the system. That would be my bet. I have no idea when the actual Chassepot rifle was made. So I'm going to say before, or 1866 or later pattern, but before 1874, because that's whenever the Gras was adopted. So sometime in that time period, that's whenever I would say this rifle was probably actually made. There were updates and conversions done to it later, in later time periods, but that right there is when I would say the rifle was actually made. Now, the Ethiopians were known for decorating their stocks, and if we look right here on the back of our stock, we can actually see this right here is a projectile or a cartridge head that was cut and nailed into the stock, I guess is what I would call it. It was shoved into the stock to serve as decoration. I know on a lot of stocks there's a little brass coin that has some information on it. That's not what this is. This says 762 right there. And I got a couple other markings that I have no idea what they mean, but this right here is clearly a primer that has been hit and detonated. So this round has been set off, and then the head was cut and shoved into the stock right here. So that's pretty cool. That's a really, really neat part of the history that we're seeing. We can see how the stock is ridiculously worn down over by this butt plate as well. Just the wood on it. The wood on this thing is very, very heavily worn. Now, of course, because this rifle is like 150 something years now, I was not expecting much finish. I was not even expecting this thing to be functional. But not only is all of the pieces internally functional, the rifle itself is functional as well, and the stock doesn't have any cracks inside of it. It is worn down, but the stock itself has no cracks. Now, I cannot show you guys simply because it's not going to pop up well on camera, but the rifling inside of the barrel is actually pretty decent as well. Of course, the rifling is quite worn out, in these couple of inches right there, but that's nothing that a quick counterbore can't fix. And, well, if I manage to counterbore this thing to the good rifling that is, back inside of it, and I manage to get my hands on some brass for this thing, then I might actually be able to load ammunition to be able to fire this thing, and boy, wouldn't that be incredible to be able to send lead through this thing that was made, I don't know, back before smokeless powder, back whenever brass cases were just starting to become a thing. This really is a fantastic little piece of history that I'm very happy to have in my collection. So all of this being said, I think that this right here has been enough of a showing for the unboxing. I am going to try and find some brass for this. I'm going to go ahead and clean out the barrel because there's a lot of funk inside of it, but the rifling is very sharp and very clear, despite the fact it's very dirty. And besides all of that, I'm just going to go ahead and do the outro. Thanks for watching, folks. I do appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day, and I guess I'll see you all on the next episode. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. Shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.